Hello and welcome to this video for today, whether you're here for the first time or you're returning. Hope you will enjoy. Hey there guys, how's it going today? Welcome, whether you're here for the first time or you're returning. Hope you will enjoy this video here today. And in this video here today, we're doing something a little bit different. We've kind of done these episodes before where it's more of a discussion and whatnot. It's more like a podcast or whatnot sort of style of presentation, I guess. And I want to do more of these podcast presentation style episodes because I think they're really good and interesting sort of things for some people to get into. I know some people really like the strategic sort of side of stuff. You know, this sort of discussion, you know, bare bones, getting back to like the basics of, you know, just considering things. Look, I'm not here, again, ever to absolutely convince anyone one way or another, you know, about anything. You know, I'm just here to offer my opinion a little bit and say, hey, you know, give this a thought, you know, and again, the way that I play is a lot different, or the meta sort of that I play in is a lot different to some people's meta. I know some people play a more, you know, casual meta than what I play. You know, there are those people, and you know, there are a lot of people as well that play a higher level of more competitive stuff than what I play. You know, I play the way I like to play. And in this episode, we're going to just be talking about, you know, play styles, I guess, is the main thing. And I sort of had a video a little while back about my own play style. So I've gone a little bit into, you know, what my play style is and whatnot. So it's, you sort of can understand, you know, where I'm coming from. And if you want to check out that video, it is here on our YouTube. I'll put a link up in the cards above. But now I'm just talking about play styles in a more broad sense. I'm not trying to talk about so much power level. I guess I still am talking about power level to a degree, but it's more about the play style. And the play style of the format that I play. Now, I've watched a lot of YouTubers, and I'm sure you guys have watched a lot of YouTubers that are out there. And, you know, again, this is my opinion of some of these other YouTubers and some of these other metas and whatnot, because I think a lot of us get that meta game kind of breakdown from watching these YouTubers and whatnot. And we all know sort of what the levels, quote unquote, of the format are, and I sort of went into that in my power levels video that I did a little while ago as well, you know. So the thing that I keep thinking about in this is, like, you have bad games sometimes. I had a bad game the other day, but again, you have bad games and stuff happens. People don't always know how powerful their deck is, even though you can sort of tell sometimes, I think. And some people, I think they forget, oh yes, you know, this person or these people aren't really into playing a much more powerful or a much more cutthroat or a much more, you know, this sort of way of playing. And again, that's where I'm sort of saying I play a certain level of, you know, power level, and I expect that level of power level. I don't expect, you know, somebody to come along with their, you know, pre-con deck, or can't expect somebody to come along with their, you know, jank deck and have a good time that much in the games that we play, because we're playing at a much higher level than what they're playing. There are some people that come to the tables that we play, and if I see that somebody's just playing a pre-con, it does depend on who it is and whatnot. But again, for the most part, the thing is, I will choose to play a deck that is somewhat weaker. Even if I might lose with that deck, I'm not that fast. again, I will choose a deck that's somewhat weaker just to see, how powerful is this deck. I don't want to immediately be just like, oh, here's the most powerful deck that I have. And none of them are super strong, and most of them are at roughly the same power level for the most part. But certainly I have one or two that are a little bit less and a little bit more depending. But again, I will choose that, power level of decks. That's the playstyle that I'm going to bring to this game, because I know this other person, they've just got a jank deck, or they seems like they've got a jank deck, or it seems like they've just got a precon that they've just pulled out, and they're not going to have a great time if I'm just playing the most powerful deck I can play. Which again isn't that much more powerful. It's not into the CDH or highly competitively casual, sort of side of things. But again, that's the playstyle that I'll bring, because that will suit that player more so for the most part. Now again, there are a couple players that sort of bring their more upgraded precons to the table, and they don't have as much chance as, what, some of the other players that usually play in the playgroups that I play have. But they still have that chance. They still have that chance to sort of win if they're left alone, if things go the right way for them. If me and one of the other players, that are playing almost at the same level most of the time, are too focused on each other, and then we almost nearly take each other out, and then the other person can just sneak in and take us out, and things like that. Those sorts of things do happen and whatnot. It happens all the time, so it's not unheard of and whatnot. Again, because you're not the threat and whatnot, you can fall under the radar and just sort of swoop in at the last moment and sort of win some games. So, you got to take, and sometimes it works like that too, just because of the nature of your deck. The nature of your deck is sometimes not very kind to you for quite a few turns, and especially when your deck is not as optimized or as finely tuned as what it maybe could be or whatnot. Sometimes you just get bad draws, things like that happen. But again, in saying about play styles, if somebody comes to the table and says that this is a very strong deck that I'm going to bring, I will just be like, well, I'm out. This is, when somebody says this is possibly a, CDH or highly casually competitive deck, I'm just out, because it's just like, well, I have nothing that can deal with that. I'm just out. Maybe I could come from behind, but again, for the most part, I'm not in the competition, and unless the other players are playing decks that are as competitive as that, then it's not like that they're going to find that moment to be like, okay, well, I'm going to take you down because we're on the same power level and you're the only threat to me, sort of thing. That's the playstyle that somebody has to bring, if those, more powerful decks are to be taken down. Somebody has to bring a deck that's as powerful, and again, you have to get, the right cards, the right draws, all the sorts of things. Again, it's not always the way that you always get it and whatnot. Yes, again, I will say that to one deck or another. It's not like, oh, well, this person is just a problem every single time. It's not like that. But it's also like, well, the other player, let's say Steve, and let's say Alan, for just references. Let's say we've played a few games with Alan, and, Alan's, not really done very much. But Steve over there, he's just been going off every other game. And then suddenly, Alan, he comes from behind and just goes absolutely off and finally wins the game. Again, it's just fun gameplay for the most part. But again, you've just seen these two players that are playing the most powerful decks mostly play by themselves. And you're just kind of sitting there going, okay, cool. Yep. Yeah. And so you start getting into these moments where you can sort of, you can really think about your game plan, but again, at a certain point, it's like, well, there is no game plan because you don't have anything to do. And that's what I mean by people's play styles need to match the rest of the players, or if the other players can't match, the other players, play style or the other players' decks, then they really shouldn't be in the same game. And this is a thing that I think it comes up a fair bit, and some people are fine playing up against decks that they have no chance of beating. I don't really get that. It doesn't make sense to me to, I'm just going to play my janky, 100 card deck that I've thrown together with, a whole bunch of commons and whatever against this much, much more powerful deck. If you want to do that and you just want to see how you go, yeah, sure, I have actually done that. But again, it's one of those things, for the most part, I just don't see the appeal in doing it over and over again. It's like, oh yeah, I lost. Want another game? I guess it is that whole, it's boredom or whatnot, I don't know, or it's a little bit of entertainment, but then again, it's just like you're watching these other 2 or 3 people or whatever play the game of solitaire or play the game properly, and you're just sitting there going, yep, okay, cool story, needs more dragons, you just can't really affect anything, and anything that you do try is just like, oh, okay, so you're not doing anything. Great. The amount of difference is just like, well, you play your land, and then they play, land, mana vault, mana crypt, soul ring, things like this, and, a signet, and, and things like that is just like, they're off to the races. They're, 20 turns ahead, on turn 1, and you're just there like, oh, okay. It's very clear that you're just like out of this game already and it hasn't even begun. It's not like people are literally comboing off or whatnot, but it's just that these people are just so far ahead, in terms of mana. And again, eventually they will get the cards like Ristic Study and Mystic Remora. I couldn't think of it. And just like other cards like that just generate value and things like that. The thing is, once they've got a player has got a certain amount of cards and mana, it's just very easy for that player to, win the game. And the game is about resource management. And this is where I want to try to pull it back to playstyles. Playstyles is playing to the rest of the table. Now, again, when you've got 3 other players that are playing a much higherly competitive styles deck, you are playing to that. And that's where, again, it's hard for that other person who might not have that level of deck. And even if you may give that player a deck that is as powerful as that, they are, maybe, depending, and even I've been playing for a few years, unable to pilot that deck in such a way that it would be needed to be piloted, in that it would be, as powerful as what the other decks are bringing. So it is a very fine balance to be able to have a game that is enjoyable for all. So when you're playing games, you have to consider where everyone's at. And sometimes I think the more experienced players need to sort of bring themselves down a bit and be like, oh, okay, we had our fun little game, and maybe we should actually just, if there's one player that's like, lesser sort of decks and whatnot, you should just say, hey guy, look, you shouldn't play with us because we're just playing high-powered games and you're not going to have much fun with us, doing what we're doing. If you want a game in a few minutes, we're going to be done. We won't be long. We'll be done in a few minutes and whatnot. And just say, hey, right, we'll bring out our, precons, or we'll bring out our, jankier decks or whatnot. And still, I'm sure that the, precons and, more janky decks that some people would have are much more powerful than some, newer decks and some more definite precons, because there are always upgrades that you can make very easily and very quickly to those decks. And it's not hard for established players just to go, oh, I'll just put in, some better mana rocks, or whatnot, or just some more ramp, or just, a few different cards that actually are a little bit more effective and a little bit more onto the main strategy of what my deck wants to do, rather than this side tangent and that side tangent and whatnot. I want to be focused on the more of this specific game plan. So, playstyles are what define, our format. Our format is completely different from, for the most part, from standard, modern, pioneer, all those constructed formats. This is technically a constructed format, but it is free form. Again, this is a format where everyone should be allowed to play their games. And again, I'm not saying people can't play CDH or they can't play higher level Magic. Again, I play in a meta that is fairly high level for the most part. Now, not the higher levels of casually competitive or whatnot, and not into CDH, no. But again, the power levels are very high, much higher than, precons or upgraded precons, certainly. So, yes, again, those players can still play, and they might have a small chance of winning, but again, the level at which we play, or I play, for the most part, is at that higher level. But there are lots of players that I know play at another level, and there are some players that I know that play CDH as well. And I know that there are a couple players that play jank decks, so, or whatnot, precon level decks. So everyone should be able to play the game if they wish to play it. Again, if you wish to go to a table and say, I don't care, even if I have a bad time, this is what I want to do, that is up to you. I'm just saying that it might not be the best decision, and it sort of makes me a little bit irked or whatnot, and it makes me feel sorry for players who just like get in over their head and whatnot and things like that. It just sort of, and it also just like looks bad when people kind of come to a table and just go, oh cool, here's my thing, I win. And the other players go, oh okay, cool. Like, they just weren't ready for this sort of thing. They were just like, oh, I've only just played my lands and like the game's over. Like, what? Like in comparison or whatnot or whatever. And there are some decks that are very much like that, where it's like, okay, I'm going to now take a 45-minute to an hour's worth of a turn for my first turn, and then I'm going to win. I know some people don't do that. They try to shorthand it as much as possible to say, hey, look, I've got these cards. Basically what happens is that I basically deck myself, or I do this or I do that and whatnot, and since I do that, basically this card, when it enters, says I win the game. They try to shortcut it in that way. I know that some players will go, okay, yeah, look, I've got turn 1 win in my hand, but again, I forget, wait a minute, in my playstyle, I am playing at a lower powered meta. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to play the game as if I didn't have that, combo in my hand. I do have it in hand, and, in a few turns, I might actually play it, but I'm just going to play land and pass. So people just sit there and will go, okay, the other players, we've played the game for an hour or two, whatever, whatever, an hour and a half or whatnot. It's getting close to lunchtime. No one else is looking like they're going to win for quite a while. You know what? I'm just going to win the game here and now because, I want to go get lunch. That, or they just go, you know what, guys, I'm going to scoop because I want to get lunch. Things like that. You should be considerate of other people. Yes, I understand that some people will say, well, that's not technically the correct play or whatnot. That's not the point. I agree in some ways, and when I play with people, for the most part, who have decks that are quite powerful, again, and that are focused on doing what their deck is doing, and focused on trying to win, and I find that very fun and very enjoyable. Everyone's out for fun, for the most part, but again, their main focus is to try to win. My deck is trying to win. I'm not trying to sit here and go, oh, okay, I'm not going to just win. I'm just going to pass the turn and hope for the best, or whatnot. Or wait till I untap with my 20 mana play or whatever, whatnot, things like that. I want to play a thing, have an immediate effect, and then say, okay, cool. Can anyone answer this? Because otherwise, next turn, I'm basically going to go blip and kill people with what I'm trying to do. And that usually happens fairly, later in the game because, again, for the most part, I don't play tutors. That's the way I decide to play. I don't play, combos again because that's the way I choose to play and just the way I like to play because, again, I just don't follow. I can follow a combo and I can follow how it works, but I can't really play it. I just lose track of how it all sort of goes together and I don't really understand it, and I just sort of, I don't get it. I just sort of like, oh, okay, I see these three cards and I understand how they work, but what do I do from there? And it's sort of like, I get bored of it very quickly. I go, oh, so you just tutored for this card, and this card, or whatever, and once you have these cards in your hand, you win. Okay, cool. So what does the rest of the deck do? Oh, okay, you've just got a bunch of removal that doesn't do anything except protect you or get rid of other people's stuff. Oh, okay, and just a few lands and ramp, and that's it. Oh, okay. When I'm shown decks like that, I don't get it. I don't see how it can actually win. I know how it can win, but it just doesn't seem like it can win to me. Like, to me, it has no way to win. Like, in my opinion, it seems like, oh, okay, so the rest of the deck does nothing. Like, it has these one or two combos, but that's it. Beyond these one or two combos, everything else that's tutoring for those combos and protecting those combos, you've got literal nothing to actually win the game. So when I play things that say, hey, answer this or it will win the game. I play things like Avenger of Zendikar. That will say, for the most part, I will win the game, because if you pair it with anything, for the most part, you pair it with Craterhoof Behemoth, that's one of the most infinite sort of quote-unquote combos, because you just have a whole bunch of creatures. All your creatures are going to get massive, and then you're just going to swing in for masses of damage at your opponents. And even, again, if they can survive that, which is very, very unlikely, they're going to be left at such a low life total that it's not going to matter. Unless they can actually kill you in the next turn after you've played your Craterhoof or whatnot, these sorts of effects, basically you've just won anyway, because that other person's going to be left on 1 or 2 whatever life. And then what are they going to do? Like, unless they can answer what you're doing or win for themselves, you're just in that position where, okay, well, you're left on 1 or 2 life. You do whatever, then it comes back to me, then I kill you with the rest of my stuff. Yes, sure, it doesn't have plus 20 or plus 50 or whatever. But again, that doesn't matter because I've just got so many things that are going to hit you and deal damage to you. And how many creatures do you have? Basically none. So, again, that's how it sort of happens. It's one of those things where, the game comes to that, again, I have enough mana, I have enough cards, I have enough, ability on whatever I'm doing, whether it's +1/+1 counters or just a, mass of tokens or whatnot. If I have amassed enough resources or whatnot, or if I was going with life drain or whatnot, this means I can kill you. If I had like the ability to play what's his name? Not Gary. I was just thinking Gary, but Gary is a good way as well. But if you could infinitely play Gravecrawler and sack it to Ashnod's Altar, and you had a Blood Artist or whatever effect on the battlefield, then I can see that you can win. Because it's very clear what you have and what you can do. But again, for the most part, when you say, oh, I have Thassa's Oracle plus this or whatnot, it's sort of just like, yeah, sure, and you've got 30 tutors or whatever to it or whatnot. But again, if you don't have those 2 cards or the other combo that's in your deck, then it's just like, oh, okay. But with Gary plus, or Kramer, with whatever, the 1-mana zombie dude, what was his name? I keep calling him something else, but whatever. You know who I'm talking about. Gravecrawler. With those sorts of things, there's lots of things that are like that and that will generate infinite mana. And there are like weapon craft enthusiasts and things like this that just basically do the same thing, that you can infinitely recur and do things like that and just go off with and make infinite mana. Once you sort of see like somebody has something that just says, I win the game, then it's very clear that they've won the game, and that's fine. If somebody has infinite mana and any kind of payoff, or just like Torment of Hailfire, then it's very clear that the game's over. Things like that. Again, those are fine things, and again, it's one of those things about playing the game. The game's got to end. Somebody's got to pull that trigger, and I get that some people are just like, well, what's the difference between somebody ending the game, after an hour's long game where everyone's got to play the game and everyone's got to do something, versus, oh, I'm just going to play a land and then I'm going to play my combo and win. Well, that's the difference. The other players didn't really get to do anything. Like, yes, sure, in those more higher powered metas, you are built around that and your ideology is around that you will win probably on those very early turns before many people have really set up very much. So it's not as much of a, resource game. The games we play are very different. Again, sometimes, but again, when you're thinking about what wins the game or what makes the game fun, that's where it comes down to me. Because again, if I was ever to go into a CDH game, I would not know what to do, but I would want to try to make that game as competitive for my other opponents as I could, because that would be what they wanted. Again, I wouldn't be able to probably do that very well, but again, that's the playstyle that you've got to try to bring, because that's what those players, want. They want somebody who can pilot a deck very, very well, incredibly well, and, pull off what their deck's trying to do, or stop the other decks from what they're trying to do. So, again, that's that way of working. If I'm to play somebody, again, who has a Janker or, pre-con level deck, then again, I would try to match my playstyle to that kind of strategy. And that would be much easier for me, even though I would find it somewhat annoying or tedious sometimes. But if I'm playing something that I really like, or that I really think is funny, or I think the other players will find funny, or interesting, or unique, or different, or have a great flavor to it, or whatnot, things like this, then that's where the fun of it can come out, instead of just, well, I'm playing to win. That's not always my goal. And again, the playstyle is always different. Some people go, you know what? Instead of playing our regular games, we're not going to play our regular games. We're going to play let's pull out one of the new precons and let's just play against each other and see what happens. We played one of each of the precons, a few weeks ago, and just had a bit of fun just because we felt like it, and we're like, oh, okay, we have these precons, why not use them for something? And we did. We just pulled them out and sleeved them up and, played them against each other for a bit. And then, we said, oh, well, that was a bit of fun, wasn't it? And we actually were surprised by a few cards and whatnot, and went, well, this card I thought was okay when I was seeing it in the spoilers and whatnot, but I didn't think it was that good. But now I've actually played with it, I think it's really good. Or you've seen a card and you go, yeah, don't think I'm that hot on that card. But then you've played it and you've gone, oh yeah, you know what? It's actually quite good. It's actually way better than what I thought. And then you've gotten cards where you go, oh my god, this card will be so good. This will be so amazing. And then you've played it and you've gone, you know what? It's not even that good. It's not that good. It's nowhere near as good as what I thought it was. So you're always surprised by some things, out there in the wild when you actually go out and play them. And again, this is true for everything and everyone and everywhere. Despite whatever, might happen, there is always another playstyle. And again, I don't want to go through too much of grading sort of stuff. But again, if you ever look at some of the games that sort of happen on YouTube and the whatnot that you see out there in the format, you can see where a lot of the channels and whatnot, all these different metagames for the most part lie, or where their focus is for that playstyle. When they, especially like the Command Zone, they have two separate sort of shows, game nights and extra turns. You can very easily see that game nights is more of a, slightly more powerful, upgraded precon sort of style of game. It's still a little bit janky, and it's geared towards having fun and whatnot, all of that stuff. It's still, we're trying to win and whatnot. And that's roughly, the power level that we would play for the most part. Around that level, maybe, roughly, but not 100%, not every deck is exactly the same and whatnot. But again, that's roughly where we play. Game, extra turns, rather, is the next level up, is the really, higher level casual competitive sort of style decks, or even, close to CDH style decks that they've got. All of their decks are decks that are trying to combo kill and win and just do that specific thing that they're doing, not just this is a deck based around synergy or whatnot of this or that. It's just based around these combos, me tutoring for those combos or whatnot. For the most part, yeah, whatever stacks or whatnot here and there, different things like that are played in that meta again. But again, whatnot, most of those decks will fall back onto a combo or whatnot, or a specific form of killing people through a different means or whatnot, through infinite life damage or through something else. So you can see, like, again, a lot of the space that is out there, these guys fit their playstyle to whatever they think their audience will like. On one side, they give the audience that's a little bit more casual, those more casual and more interesting, yet still somewhat more high-powered-ish games out there, so that people, picking up the precon can go, oh wow, he had a really interesting build or whatnot, but Josh is always playing, much more powerful decks or whatnot, and Jimmy's trying to, outdo it all and whatnot, and whatever, but that's the fun of it. And then when you see the players who go, what, that was the correct play to make, they're obviously the ones that are trying to watch extra turns and whatnot, and these more CDH playing with power and whatnot sort of channels. This channel, again, would probably fall into the game nights sort of level of decks. So, but that's how it is, and nitpicking nerds, I think that they're sort of somewhere between sort of, I guess, game nights and maybe extra turns, but they're certainly much closer to extra turns, I think. I actually think they're probably on extra turns level more so than they are. I think they probably do have some more, jankier decks as well, because I know that Joe Cherry said that he has, a big stumpy deck, and it's a big stumpy deck, and it does big stumpy things. And that sounds cool, like a cool deck that I wouldn't mind playing with or playing against either. But again, you can hear where these sort of players love to play, and you can sort of hear where I love to play. But again, they try to suit their play style to a certain audience, and that audience depends on, and that audience can also be like the players in the playgroup. So again, I try to play games that are to the audience, and sometimes the audience is the playgroup. So again, that's what I try to do, for the most part, and that's what I think more people need to do. They need to consider, their play style in the games that they're playing. If somebody comes along and is playing a very powerful deck, and you happen to be playing a very powerful deck, but you're showing some restraint and just sitting there and going, okay, I know these other two players aren't playing very powerful decks, but I'm just going to play my deck as it is. But this other player is playing a very powerful deck and basically just trying to win the game. Then you might want to focus on that person and say, hey, look, I'm just going to slow you down just a little bit there, buddy. I don't want you just winning, because I want the other players to have the chance to actually play the game and not feel like, well, what was the point of playing with these other two guys? They were just wanting to go, brrr, and I win. It should be fun for all the players. And again, you've got to take different tacks sometimes. So just consider your play style when you're playing games with various different people, because you're always going to play with various different people. And again, just be understanding as well. If somebody comes to the table, if somebody brings their deck and sort of just kills you out of nowhere on turn 1, 2, or whatever, on the very early turns of the game. Just be very understanding and be like, if somebody says, hey, I didn't realize this deck was that powerful, I'm sorry, do be understanding again. But be understanding if somebody's a bit miffed to say, hey, well, I didn't really sign up to play against a deck like that. If somebody isn't comfortable playing against decks like that, then you shouldn't say that this is fine or whatnot. These things aren't fine if somebody doesn't agree to them. It's basically like raping somebody and then saying, oh, well, that was fine, whatnot. And again, that's what's, emotionally sort of going on for somebody. If somebody feels like, well, that wasn't great for me and I feel violated, a little bit or whatnot, or I feel very mad because I was not expecting this to happen. I was not expecting that kind of game, and I just do not usually sign up for these sorts of games. So if somebody feels like, well, that was a bit shitty, then you shouldn't be saying, well, that was fine. No, it wasn't fine for that player or for that person. And if you are telling that person otherwise, again, you're trying to tell them their favorite flavor of ice cream or whatnot, this sort of thing. Everyone has their own favorite flavor of ice cream. You can't dictate people's favorite flavor of ice cream. Each person's favorite flavor of ice cream is going to be unique to them, so you have to just leave them be. And again, whoever it is, just remember that whoever is doing the right or wrong thing, whatever, it doesn't matter. Everyone in their own mind is right. They think that they're right because it's them. They're biased towards themselves. They're never going to realistically think that they're wrong in doing what they're doing because, again, that's the way, we all rationalize ourselves. We all rationalize what we're doing to think that we're right in doing what we're doing. And I just try to say, hey, consider it. Consider that you might not be right. Consider the other people that are around you and whatnot. Again, just consider those people. The world doesn't revolve around you. You're not always right, and you don't always know what's best for somebody else. You can make suggestions for people and whatnot, but again, for the most part, you need to let people do what they want to do and play the way that they want to play and have their life the way they want to have their life and whatnot. These sorts of things. But anyway, guys, I think this has been an interesting conversation to have about playstyles and playing the game and whatnot. And that sort of thing. And just playing in different levels and whatnot. Things like that. I hope you've found it interesting, and tell me what you think about these sorts of episodes right down there in the comments below. Please remember that the success of channels like this is based on viewers like you, so please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing if you would like to support this content. You can also get social with us on our Discord and on our Facebook. If you would like to further support the channel, you can go onto our Patreon. All links are in the description. Thank you for your support. It really means a lot. I hope you have enjoyed this video here today. And if you have, I hope you will come back for another one. See you then.